Now that I'm 6, I'm clever as clever. I think I shall be 6, forever and ever. That's a quote from A.A. Milne, author of the Winnie the Pooh books, and it seems quite appropriate for the prisoner, doesn't it? Will he ever escape? Or will he be 6, forever and ever? In tonight's episode, Once Upon a Time, the prisoner faces the toughest battle he's yet fought, as number 2 attempts to discover the source of his rebellious attitude in order to reshape his entire personality to fit the philosophy of the village. Here we finally get some answers to questions raised throughout the series. We learn, for instance, why our hero resigned. Not the specifics, but the emotional reason. And for those of you interested in the identity of the prisoner, listen carefully to number 2's line in the school days segment, which begins, "Report to my office in the morning." I'll be back after the episode with some more comments about the series and its role as modern-day mythology. I'm Scott Apel, the new number 2. Now, where was I? Oh yes, once upon a time... There's a concept in psychiatry known as transference, where basically the patient uses the doctor's strength as a crutch until he's back on solid ground. There is also, however, a thing called countertransference, where the doctor can become infected by the problems of the patient. This can happen when the strength of the patient's will overpowers that of the doctor, and you've just witnessed a perfect example of this in Once Upon a Time. In his attempt to isolate and harness the prisoner's rebellious nature, number 2 fell victim to the very same trait within himself. Yes, this number 2 is indeed a rebel. We see it in his attitude towards number 1 at the very opening. And he instinctively knows the right question to ask a fellow rebel. Not, why did you resign, but why do you care? He is, however, a failed rebel. He's too self-centered to care for anyone but himself. And when number 6 gains control and offers number 2 his freedom, number 2 breaks down and hides. He is afraid of that freedom and the responsibilities that would come with it. Small wonder he fought so hard to suppress it. Here the prisoner has won his ultimate victory over number 2. They have changed places. The prisoner fully realizes this. He knows he wouldn't kill, so he feels safe in handing the new number 2. Number 6? A knife. Even the butler recognizes that the transference is complete and absolute. The problem we have with an episode like this is how we can possibly fully analyze it in what little time we have here tonight. So instead, let's concentrate on one aspect of the series which indicates its mythic nature, the hero's journey. In his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the eminent scholar of mythology Joseph Campbell outlines the basic pattern underlying all mythic tales of this type. A man leaves his home, travels to a strange and wondrous land, fights and conquers bizarre monsters, wins a valuable prize, and then returns home to relate his journey. The tales of Ulysses, Jason, and Sinbad are just a few of these immortal travelers. And so, of course, is the prisoner. Here we've seen a man kidnapped from his London home and taken to the village to battle against its warped microcosm of society. But what is the valuable prize he could win? And will he ever escape once and for all to return home to tell his tale? To answer these questions, we need to use a 20th century interpretation of mythology, that of the famous Swiss psychologist Dr. Carl Jung. Jung saw in mythology a reflection of the deep inner activities of the mind and saw this hero's journey as a symbolic roadmap of the search for psychological wholeness, which he called individuation. The final 4 episodes of The Prisoner paint a vivid portrait of this process of individuation. In Hammer into Anvil, the prisoner confronts the dark side of his own nature, which Jung called the shadow, as represented by the sadistic paranoid number 2. As a spy, these are psychological characteristics to which the prisoner could easily have succumbed. But instead, he faces and comes to terms with them, and in doing so, becomes immune to them. In The Girl Who Was Death, he faces the next deeper level of psychological strata, his own inner feminine nature, the dark side of his anima, that fascination with death which perhaps guided him into the excitement of spying in the first place. Here again, we see him unaffected by death's flirtations. He conquers and integrates even that. And now, in Once Upon a Time, he has faced himself, his whole psychological history, and once again emerges the victor. He stands at the very brink of psychological wholeness. But there is still one battle to be fought. He must now pass through the deepest level of the mind, the archetypes of the collective unconscious, the symbolic representations of basic patterns of human action. In next week's episode, Fallout, we see this mental depth symbolized as a physical descent into caverns far beneath the village. And this collective unconscious, where we are all joined together, is symbolized as a grotesque tribunal assembled to judge him. Here, then, he must confront the very archetypal basis of the society which plagued him in the village. And in this deepest level of the mind, there is still one more foe to be faced, the mysterious source of all his suffering, the elusive and mythical number one. Is the prisoner enough of an individual to withstand this final temptation to conform? Will he escape to finish his mythic journey, closing the circle of his experience? You'll find the answers to these questions and many more in next week's allegorical finale, Fallout. Be seeing you then.